Hi everybody. If you've made it this far in the course, you already know far more about the home buying process than the vast majority of first-time home buyers. Knowledge is power. Now let's dive into the final part of the home buying process, the closing process. It's also called the settlement process. Okay, back to the story. Congratulations, you're under contract. You have a written contract signed by you and your landlord to buy the place from your landlord, the seller. The hardest part is over, but you still have a lot of work to do before closing and taking ownership of the home. Your contract could still fall through. In the previous step, when you were coming to an agreement with your landlord, the mechanics were probably a lot different than in a normal sale. You may have had to pay your own real estate agent, for example. From here on out, however, the mechanics of the closing process are pretty much the same whether you're buying from your landlord or any other seller. Hopefully your attorney or real estate agent will go over with you your specific contract and explain to you step by step everything that everyone does before ownership of the home is transferred to you. If they don't, you should ask them, really, ask them to explain it all. It's definitely worth your time now to learn how the closing process will work in your case. You want to avoid being blindsided later on by something you didn't know was coming. Particularly if you've bought a home in another state, you might be surprised just how different the process can be in a different state. The actual mechanics of transferring ownership of houses varies from state to state. The general tasks needed to close the sale and transfer ownership don't change a ton from state to state, but who does the task and how they're done does change a ton from state to state. Different states have different laws and traditions. In the United States, there are two general types of states when it comes to the mechanics of closing contracts and transferring ownership of houses. In the real estate biz, they're sometimes called attorney states and escrow states. Let's do a quick overview. Most of the states in the Northeast and the Southeast are attorney states. State law in those states say licensed attorneys have to do some of the tasks involved in transferring ownership of homes and land. But each attorney state has different laws about which tasks have to be done by licensed attorneys. Some attorney states require a lot of direct involvement attorneys and others require a lot less. The attorneys doing those tasks to transfer ownership are called closing attorneys, or more generically, they're called closing agents. These closing attorneys do not necessarily negotiate contracts between buyer and seller. Closing attorneys make sure that everything the buyers and sellers agree to in the contract is done according to the contract, and then they transfer to you, the buyer, the ownership. The closing attorney might work for your lender or your title insurance company, or they might be on their own. The takeaway here is that in attorney states, the closing attorney coordinates the process of transferring title. Closing attorneys do not typically help you negotiate price and terms with the seller. You'll need to hire your own separate real estate attorney to help you with that if you want help in that. Here's a stylized version of what happens during the actual closing in attorney states, but there are many variations. Everyone meets in the same room at the same time on the closing day. The buyer, the seller, their attorneys, someone from the mortgage company, maybe someone from the title insurance company. You bring a paper cashier's check to cover that cash to close amount your attorney or your loan officer told you to bring. The person representing your lender brings a check for the amount of money they're lending you. You sign all the loan documents. You and the seller sign all the other documents related to the sale, including the new deed. Then the cashier's checks exchange hands, and you walk away with the keys to the place in your pocket, a deed to the property in your name, and a big mortgage to pay every month. Okay, now we're going to switch to talking about escrow states. Most of the states in the Midwest and West are called escrow states. Instead of attorneys, escrow states use escrow officers or title agents to do closings. Generically, they're all called closing agents. These closing agents do the work more or less that closing attorneys would do in attorney states. Well, kind of. Here's a stylized version of what happens during a closing in escrow states. A few days before the scheduled closing date, the seller will go into the closing agent's office and sign all the documents they need to sign related to the sale. This will include the deed, the new deed. Then a day or two before the closing date, the buyer will go into the closing agent's office and sign all of their loan documents and all the other documents the buyer needs to sign, like the deed, the new deed. The closing agent holds the signed documents in escrow until the actual closing on the scheduled closing date. About a day before closing, the buyer will then wire their cash to close money into the escrow account. The morning of closing, the mortgage company will wire all the money you're borrowing into the escrow account. Now the escrow account has a ton of money in it. Later that day, after the closing agent makes sure everything in the contract has been fulfilled by both you and the seller, the closing agent will pay everyone that needs to get paid out of the money in the escrow account and then transfer the title to the property to you. You get a phone call saying now you own the place and you arrange to pick up the keys to the house from your real estate agent. Closing in escrow states are more convenient for buyers and sellers. They are usually given a choice of times when they can come in to sign everything. With table closings in attorney states, everyone has to meet at the same time at the same table, which can be a pain in the neck to arrange depending on everyone's schedule. Psychologically, however, a table closing in an attorney state feels very different than a closing in an escrow state. In a table closing, all the actions build and build until the big finale. At the closing table, everybody signs everything, checks are exchanged, and you walk out the door, the owner with the keys in your pocket. In escrow states, you don't get the keys and take ownership immediately after signing the papers. Maybe you have to go to the title company office 2 days before closing and sign all the buyer documents. And then on the closing date, you just get a phone call saying, hey, congratulations, it closed, you now own the place. Without a big signing finale, buying a home in an escrow state can feel a bit unfinished to people who have bought homes before in states with table closings. The takeaway here is that every state has different laws about how to transfer home ownership. In general, however, states in the Northeast and Southeast tend to be attorney states, and states in the Midwest and West tend to be escrow states. The large variability between states is another good reason why you should hire your own real estate attorney or real estate agent to help you. Okay, now let's talk about contract contingencies. Can you cancel the contract and get a full refund of your earnest money if